On today's show, less than 24 hours to go until the NBA trade deadline. Who stays and who goes for the Houston Rockets? Eric Gordon and Jae'Sean Tate surfacing in some NBA rumors. Could those guys be on the way out? And what would a return look like for those two guys? Plus, we take a look around the NBA landscape at some of the other deals that could be on the horizon and how they impact the Houston Rockets. All that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help us out tremendously by commenting anything below. What I want to know from you is, what do you want to see out of the Houston Rockets ahead of the NBA trade deadline? Let me know what you want to see the Rockets do ahead of the trade deadline in the comments of the YouTube show. But as always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Now, we'll take a look at some of the recent reporting, some of the rumors surrounding the two names that it feels like for the Houston Rockets most likely to maybe be moved ahead of the NBA trade deadline, Eric Gordon and Jae'Sean Tate, with some interest league-wide from a bunch of different teams looking to maybe pry Jae'Sean Tate away from the Houston Rockets. We'll also take a bit of a step out and take a look at the broader NBA landscape, some of the deals that may or may not be going down elsewhere around the NBA concerning the Brooklyn Nets and the Kevin Durant situation, the potential three-team deal in the works between the LA Lakers, Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Utah Jazz centered around Russell Westbrook, Mike Conley, and D'Angelo Russell, how that impacts the Rockets, all of that. But first, let's dive in here and let's focus on Eric Gordon from the jump, because Eric Gordon is the one name that I feel like has been, look, Eric Gordon has been stuck in limbo with the Houston Rockets for years now, it feels like, right? With Rockets fans just begging, hey, trade EG, right? Get him to a contender, right? And try to maximize the value for him. At this point, it feels like the Rockets have missed their window to extract maximum value for a veteran like Eric Gordon. And I see arguments on both sides, right? Because at this point, if the goal is to just trade Eric Gordon just for the sake of trading him, that feels like you're going to take an L, right? It feels like you're going to take an L regardless, almost at this point, in any deal that you get for Eric Gordon. If there is a first out there, maybe it's a late first in this year's draft, guess what? Then you're straddled with the issue of you still got the Milwaukee late first that you've got already. Then if you pick up another late first for Eric Gordon, now you've got two late firsts that you got to figure out something to do with, right? Maybe if you can package them together, that makes it a little bit easier to get a future asset to kick the can a little bit further down the road. But from the Rockets' perspective, they've had ample time and opportunity to move on from Eric Gordon. And now they're in this position where he's got half a year, half a season left on his contract, effectively a team option for next year, which does provide some future flexibility and control for any potential team that the Rockets do want to trade him to. But it also has some flexibility for the Rockets, right? When you look at the situation that the Rockets are in, if all you can get for Eric Gordon is a late first-round draft pick, and that's it, right? That's all you can get for him at this point. No future asset, no potential young promising player, not a 3-and-D guy coming back, whatever. If that's all you can get for Eric Gordon, maybe the best route forward is just holding on to him, because you can always just get rid of him this offseason. You can let him walk for nothing if you want to open up that max amount of cap space and get up to that $60 million figure that the Rockets have been projecting to have. You can let him walk for that, right? Just, all right, bye, Eric. Thank you for your services. Cool. You can also potentially renegotiate a new contract with Eric this offseason, right? You can say, hey, Eric, we'll let you out of your deal if you re-sign for $10 million a year for 2 or 3 years, right? Because when you look at what Eric Gordon can provide to a competitive team, he is a good basketball player. And the Rockets don't want to be bad next season, right? And when you look around the NBA landscape at some of the names that you may or may not be able to get in free agency this upcoming offseason as like veteran additions to the roster, I don't see a name out there that makes a whole lot of sense more than Eric Gordon if you can get him at that value, or if you just hold on to him at his, you just pick up the option, right? And then you have that 20-something million as tradable salary. Maybe you use that and you couple that with KPJ's contract or something. You make a splash as far as a trade goes this upcoming offseason, in addition to some signings with the cap space. There's optionality there with Eric. And at this point, because the Rockets have kind of run their course with Eric Gordon, I get it. People are upset. Maybe a different veteran voice would have been better for this young group. That maybe there were, other options the Rockets could have taken advantage of along the way. Unfortunately, they didn't. Hindsight's always 20/20. But now we're at this point with Eric Gordon where what do? Do you trade him just to try and save face? Do you trade him for some package out there like the 4 future seconds from Milwaukee? No, you don't want to do something like that. You don't want to trade him just for the sake of trading him at this point. And I feel like that's where the Rockets are at, is moving on from Eric Gordon at this point. While it would open up more minutes for this little half-season stretch for guys like Tari Eason and guarantee that KJ Martin would continue to get the minutes that he's been getting in the absence of Kevin Porter Jr. whenever he does return to the Houston Rockets lineup, it might not be the best thing for the long-term success of the organization at this point to move on from Eric Gordon, given the fact that there are some other options that you have at hand with him this offseason. So as far as Eric Gordon concerns right now, there are some teams with some, reported rumored interest in him, like the LA Clippers, the Phoenix Suns, but it also feels like there's kind of a bit of a standstill right now with some of the teams in the NBA looking at trying to pry away Kevin Durant from the Brooklyn Nets, the Phoenix Suns being one of those teams that were actively in talks for Kevin Durant in the offseason. It feels like the Nets may pull the trigger on a KD deal. And if they do, or until there's a resolution on whether or not that happens, it feels like that's going to kind of create a backlog, kind of a jam on other deals coming through around the NBA landscape for guys like an Eric Gordon to a team like the Phoenix Suns who could utilize an Eric Gordon. Or the LA Lakers getting ready to pull the trigger on a Russell Westbrook 3-team deal. That kind of hurts the market for Eric Gordon as well. So right now, it doesn't really feel like the Rockets are operating from a position of leverage. It doesn't really feel like there's a great market for Eric Gordon, unfortunately. And the Rockets might ultimately just be best served to hold on to Eric Gordon and trying to figure something out with him this offseason, even if, unfortunately, the painful thing might just be if you let him walk for nothing, yes, that is an L. The front office has to take that L. But if they're able to let him walk and they use the cap space for better purposes this offseason, so be it. It'd be unfortunate to have a mismanagement of an asset like that, but that's kind of where you find yourself at with Eric Gordon at this point. Somebody who is striking interest across the NBA landscape and does have the possibility of being traded at this deadline is Jae'Sean Tate, who is rumored to have some interest from a bunch of different teams around this NBA trade deadline. We'll talk about Jae'Sean Tate, what he might be able to fetch in a return, the likelihood of the Rockets moving on from him, the idea of consolidating some of these players, these assets moving forward. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with the people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data, and they identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect them fast and for free to you. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. The NBA trade deadline is approaching, and Locked On has you covered. Thursday, February 9th, tune into Locked On NBA YouTube at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to hear reaction from the trades that will change the rest of the NBA season. Who becomes contenders and who's tanking for a better future? Subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube and don't miss a single deal. Now, let's talk a little bit about the other name, because obviously Eric Gordon, does it happen? Does it not happen? I'm resigned to the fact that the Rockets are probably going to hold on to Eric Gordon at this trade deadline, which is, very anticlimactic. It's probably not what a lot of Rockets fans want to hear. But again, I see arguments on both sides at this point, and trading him just for the sake of trading him is not the move, in my opinion. Even though I've been banging the drum for a while about moving on from Eric Gordon, if the offers aren't there, which it feels like the market is it feels pretty dried up for the teams that may have had interest in Eric Gordon, and there's also kind of that standstill going on with whether or not Kevin Durant gets moved. It just doesn't feel like there's going to be much opportunity to get something back, something of genuine value for EG at this deadline, and the Rockets may just be better off holding on to him. So that's disappointing for a bunch of different reasons. But Jae'Sean Tate is a guy that is generating some buzz around the league. So I will start off by saying that a good friend of the program, Roosh Williams, did initially report that the Boston Celtics had interest in Jae'Sean Tate. They were even dangling Grant Williams as the name to potentially acquire Tate. And then Kelly Iko further solidified that initial report by following up saying that the Phoenix Suns have had interest in Jae'Sean Tate, Denver Nuggets, and the Washington Wizards. However, Iko did follow up by saying the Rockets aren't looking to trade the 27-year-old forward, who is internally regarded as one of the most important pieces of this youthful roster. But as is the case with any players, if there was a can't-turn-down type offer, it would be considered. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, the feeling that, like, Jae'Sean Tate, of all players, is one of the most important pieces of this youthful roster is very strange. Obviously, look, I love JT. He provides a lot to this Rockets team. The defense, the intensity, the leadership, the offensive versatility, the playmaking. The only thing he can't do is shoot the ball, right? And he's a bit undersized as far as, NBA forwards are concerned at 6'4". He doesn't have a crazy wingspan, whatever. He makes up for it, I think, with his intensity defensively. He's a very capable player. And you put him on a team like Boston Celtics or the Golden State Warriors or whatever, the Lakers, he would easily be like a top 8 rotation guy. He's a winning basketball player. He's a high IQ guy, can cut, can finish, all of it, right? That said, there's no reason that the Rockets, who have been the worst team almost 3 years running, should be turning their noses up at offers for Jae'Sean Tate, right? A can't turn down type offer. If a team came calling for Jae'Sean Tate with a 2024 first-round pick or later with minimal protections on it, say top 14 protected, I would pack his bags for him probably at this point, because these are the types of hard decisions. As much as I appreciate and love what Jae'Sean Tate has shown us, and he's a fan favorite for the Rockets, all that, right? These are the hard decisions that front offices have to be able to make, right? You have to be able to consolidate some of your assets. And if teams are calling about Jae'Sean Tate and they're ponying up decent offers, then you've got to entertain those offers. Because otherwise, what happens further down the line when guys start to further develop, right? When KJ starts coming along or Tari takes a step up and you're like, okay, Tari needs to supersede Jae'Sean Tate in the rotation, or when Jabari finally figures it out. Like, those three guys, I feel like, have a better chance and better potential down the line as far as being key pieces you actually want to hold on to throughout the rebuild and maybe holding on to into when the Rockets are next relevant than Jae'Sean Tate does. There's an argument that if the Rockets want to be good next season, then yeah, maybe you hold on to Jae'Sean Tate. He's a guy that can play winning basketball right now. And with, a different coach and a slight change in personnel, then maybe Jae'Sean Tate as a key piece of a team that is looking to make the play-in or be a lower tiered playoff team would actually be a difference maker, right? Eye test. We've seen how impactful Jae'Sean Tate can be when he's on the floor for the Rockets. But that doesn't mean you turn your nose up at any of these offers, right? And if teams are calling, if the Nuggets are calling, if the Celtics, if the Wizards, if they're hitting up the Rockets about a trade for Jae'Sean Tate, then if you can get back a future first-round draft pick or another maybe younger, promising type player for Jae'Sean Tate, then I feel like you gotta explore those options, right? There are some serious considerations to make because, again, next season, this offseason, the Rockets are going to have to consolidate a bunch of these pieces, right? I would venture to say that a chunk of this roster probably won't be here next year unless the Rockets decide they just want to continue on this autopilot path of not really doing much of anything, right? We already saw them the ship has sailed on what feels like Eric Gordon and extracting maximum value for him. Now, while the Rockets aren't in this position of needing to deal Jae'Sean Tate because he's on a very team-friendly deal. They have him for the next 2.5 seasons. They can easily revisit discussions for Tate this offseason or next trade deadline, and he's going to have the same value now that he does then, right? He's, a Swiss Army knife type player, can be a part of an 8-man rotation, can help a contender, can kind of shore up the end of the bench for them, that kind of thing. He's going to be that same player a year from now. Not an issue. So you don't have to trade Jae'Sean Tate, But because of when you look at the rest of the roster around him and guys who are going to need minutes and guys who want, guys that you want to potentially allow to continue to develop and thrive and actually give some of that playing time to, is Jae'Sean Tate eating into some of that? He absolutely is. Right now he's eating into playing time for Ty Washington. And are the Rockets a better team when Jae'Sean Tate's on the floor? Absolutely. Does that matter in the grand scheme of things this season? It doesn't, because they're still going to be a bad team. And you know what? Ty Washington needs reps. He needs his chance to go out there and play. But instead, they're running out, backup point guard Jae'Sean Tate. And it looks cool when they do it, and it's effective at times. But it's also really disconcerting that they're not giving Ty Washington the opportunity to play that backup point guard role after he seemingly earned it and then had it taken away once Jae'Sean Tate was back in the rotation. And then on top of that, Daishen Nick's starting games in front of him. It's a whole conundrum. But with Jae'Sean Tate, if teams are interested in him, the Rockets should absolutely be listening to those calls. And it doesn't have to be a can't turn down type offer. What you want to do, if you're an organization in this position, you want a front office that can make these hard decisions, that can evaluate and say, you know what, we really like what Tate brings to the table. Yes, we found him. Yes, we grabbed him from overseas when nobody else knew he existed. Yes, we dusted him off. We said, all right, you know what, we think you can be something. And guess what? He turned into a quality NBA player. But is he a foundational piece of this rebuild moving forward? No, he's not. Right? Like there's very few players on this Rockets roster that you can safely say, you know what? Yeah, this guy's going to be here when the Rockets are good again. And I would place a very, very safe amount of, I would place, if I were placing a bet, which you could do over at FanDuel.com, on whether or not Jae'Sean Tate is part of the Rockets roster when they are winning games again, I would absolutely slam the under, over, whatever on that not being the case, because you've got to like have some roster churn, right? That's the move. We haven't seen any roster churn from this organization. Eric Gordon is potentially going to retire a Houston Rocket. Jae'Sean Tate is being valued as, or internally regarded as, one of the most important pieces of this youthful roster. Like, there's a level of attachment to some of these players by the current front office that is a bit concerning. And they might be overvaluing some of their own talent, which is leading them to not make the moves that you would potentially see other organizations willing to make in this position if you were the Rockets. So does Jae'Sean Tate get moved ahead of the trade deadline? I would absolutely do it if it was a 2024 first-round pick or further down the line, something to that degree, and if you're not taking back bad money or anything like that. But at the same time, you're not in the same position with Tate of having to move on from him. But with some of the reports that there are teams interested, I feel like it would be a misstep not to take advantage of the situation right now when the Rockets are kind of under, or going to be under, kind of a roster crunch, needing to consolidate some of these assets. That's one of the guys that you could probably safely move on from and feel pretty good about it in the long term. Now, coming up, I want to get into some of the NBA-wide impacts of some of the other deals going on, some of the stuff going on with the KD situation, taking a look elsewhere around the NBA landscape, plus some of the other smaller deals that the Houston Rockets could potentially entertain. Again, making moves on the margins at this trade deadline, and some of the stuff that could potentially materialize for this front office that we can hope to see, but will we see it? We're going to get there in just one moment after a quick message from our friends over at FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can go bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown first. The FanDuel Sportsbook is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid on your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's take before we take a bird's eye view of the rest of the NBA landscape and some of the trades that are, or potential trades, right, that are going to be holding things up and how they impact the Rockets going into the deadline. I want to use a quick example of something that we could hopefully maybe see the Rockets do, and that's the San Antonio Spurs, right? Fellow tanking team, rebuilding team. They took in Dwayne Dedmon from the Miami Heat, right? Saved the Miami Heat some money, and they took in a second-round pick to do so, right? Those are the types of deals that you would hope to see the Rockets try and maneuver and try and pull off. and that we haven't seen much of it all over the course of this rebuild, right? We haven't seen the Rockets really utilizing like their cap space to save money for other teams or flipping assets. And again, it's those little bitty moves at the margins that, yeah, they're not blockbuster type trades, but maybe they could use, right, they could use Boban's contract, right? Trade Boban to another team for, a salary that's a little bit higher than his, $5-6 million, whatever, because you can aggregate that salary and get higher up, and the Rockets can receive more salary back. And maybe you do something like that to help a team, duck the luxury tax or, just save on their tax bill a little bit, right? Reduce their tax footprint. And it's those types of opportunities where maybe you take back a second round pick for doing that, right? And you do enough of those deals, right, to where then you have the cupboard is full of a bunch of second round assets, and then you package some of those for some firsts, so you put those together for like a decent, a quality young prospect or something like that. And we just haven't seen the Rockets do those little moves at the margins, right? We haven't seen them, taking advantage of some of these opportunities that they probably could have been over this last 2.5 years throughout the rebuild. And so even though those trades are not going to necessarily make or break you, they help put you in better position for bigger deals further down the line. And so if I were the Rockets, right, I mean, what is Boban doing on the roster other than he checks in occasionally in garbage time and the crowd goes crazy for him whenever he touches the basketball? Cool. He's there for the vibes. That doesn't, like, if you can get a second round pick for trading Boban and his salary to another team and taking back another expiring contract or what have you, again, flipping him somehow, roster churn, using that term again, then you do it, right? Like, that's the kind of move that you would hope to see out of a rebuilding front office. And then, on top of that, some of the other young talent that the Rockets have, right? I mean, maybe there's a team that's, again, Josh Christopher, maybe there are teams interested in him. Would you take back a first for Josh Christopher at this point? Would you take a flyer on a couple seconds for Josh Christopher? Usman Garuba, if a team came knocking about him, would you entertain those calls? Like, you got to be able to kind of understand organizationally, the front office has to be able to figure out, okay, which guys are we willing to take calls on? What are we trying to do? Who are we trying to get assets for? Because teams are much more likely to trade for one of these guys at the deadline than they are in the offseason, right? And this Rockets team is about to hit an offseason where they're probably going to prune a lot of the names on this current roster as they're trying to be relevant again next season. And hell, there's an opportunity out there, right? The Golden State Warriors want to try and shed James Wiseman, right? Because he's going to cost them this season. He's cost them like $80 million something in luxury tax. And next season it'll be like $130 million. And if they shed his $10 million salary, then they save all that tax money, right? If I were the Rockets, I would absolutely take a flyer on James Wiseman. I would see what you could throw together and bring him back and give the Warriors the salary cap relief, whatever it is. But the Rockets don't have the aggregatable salary to do that. I mean, unless you want to maybe, again, it doesn't really save them the money if you send him Jae'Sean Tate because he's not an expiring contract. Maybe you loop in a third team, right? But the Rockets just don't have that movable salary at this point. They've got a bunch of really, really cheap contracts. Jae'Sean Tate is like their one mid-tier contract. And then they've got all their rookie scale deals, Jabari, Jalen, around $10 million. And then they've got Eric Gordon. And those are all their contracts. Like, they don't have, and Kevin, but he's still on this super cheap deal, right? His $16 million doesn't kick in until next season. So the Rockets don't have a lot of contracts that they can kind of use to match money in these types of deals, right? And this has been an issue in the past for the Rockets. They've had, back when they were trying to deal Christian Wood originally, they couldn't make the money work on a deal with the Portland Trailblazers, who were expressing interest in Christian Wood. And they've had offers for Eric Gordon that they couldn't make work because the money just wouldn't line up. So some of that is the issue with the other teams not having the right pieces, all that. But I hear a lot of, oh, well, we had this deal with this team, we couldn't make it happen. Oh, we had this deal with this team, but we couldn't make it happen. Well, what needs to start happening to be able to make some of these deals come through, right? And right now, it just feels like a very unfavorable market for the Houston Rockets because you got the KD situation, which is going to make everything come screeching to a standstill until there's a resolution on KD or until the Nets come out and flat out say, we are not moving KD at the deadline, right? And then other teams are like, okay, fine, we'll stop asking. But that's problematic for the Rockets, right? Because you already have one team off the board in the Dallas Mavericks, who were a great Eric Gordon suitor. They're off the board with the Kyrie trade. Another team potentially off the board as an Eric Gordon suitor with the LA Lakers potentially doing the 3-team deal with Russell Westbrook, D'Angelo Russell, and Mike Conley, that 3-team permutation. So that's another one off the board. The Phoenix Suns would be a great Eric Gordon destination. Guess what? They're currently preoccupied with Kevin Durant. So right now, unfortunately, this is what happens when you don't capitalize in previous deadlines or off seasons where Eric Gordon did have the same value, where you probably could have gotten a first or a future first for him. And now the Rockets are backed against a wall to where it's either deal Eric Gordon or lose him for nothing this offseason if you choose not to bring him back. Maybe bringing him back is the right move, right? But that feels like the only way that the Rockets can hold on to Eric Gordon. And again, at that point, it might just be holding on to him just to save face, because then you can be like, oh, well, this was our plan the whole time. We never wanted to trade Eric Gordon. We always thought he was going to be a great piece. You know, we wanted to keep him around until we were relevant again because he's a good winning basketball player. Like, but at that point, you're just, I don't know, it's kind of a mess. Eric Gordon should have been dealt a long time ago, and it feels like the org is not in a spot to be able to deal him this deadline based on the way the market is looking. But the Rockets may also be able to find themselves getting involved as a third-team facilitator for Kevin Durant. I know that was an option that was on the table originally when KD first asked out. I know it's an option that's been explored before, and maybe there's a possibility, right? But it's all dependent on whether or not the Nets are interested in getting their picks back. And right now, it feels like going into this deadline, the mentality has changed, right? When those talks happened before, the Nets were kind of open to the idea of, maybe getting our picks back would be good, right? If we're going to blow everything up here, if things are going to suck, then getting our picks back would be solid. But it doesn't feel like that's the direction now, especially if with the Suns being rumored favorites to potentially, make a play for Kevin Durant. Some deals centered around DeAndre Ayton and, I don't know, one of Mikal Bridges or Cam Johnson or something to that effect, and then a bunch of draft capital. That might be the best possible return for KD at this point. And it doesn't necessarily look like the Nets are willing to or want to just trade KD, either to a third team and get back their own assets and just be bad and bottom out this season. Even though bottoming out this season would have been the smart play because the Rockets have a swap with the Nets. And so the Nets theoretically, they could still bottom out the rest of the season. And as long as the Rockets finish ahead of the Nets and their pick lands ahead of the Nets in the lottery, then that swap is null and void. So the Rockets could finish with the number 1 overall pick and land Wemby, and the Nets could finish and they could get the number 2 overall pick and land Scoot Henderson in the aftermath of the Kyrie Irving KD situation. That would probably be the smart route for the Suns to go. But it feels like they don't want to bottom out. Joe Tsai feels, I don't know, it feels like he wants to put together a, semi-competent team. When you look at like the return from the Kyrie Irving trade, they got the one future first in there, but they got back, quality rotation guys and Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, guys who can help keep the team relevant right now. And maybe some of that was a play to just be able to keep Kevin Durant. But right now, the NBA trade deadline, things are going to be very, very slow until there's a resolution on the KD front. And maybe the Rockets find themselves involved as a third-team facilitator there. It would be a smart play to try and get involved and try to see if you can, again, receive future assets or kind of reload the picks a little bit. Maybe you get back a young prospect, a young promising piece. I would love, if the Suns are going to get involved in a KD deal and the Rockets could get involved as a third team, I would love a Cam Johnson type in Houston. If you could get Cam Johnson on the Rockets right now and give up, 1 or 2 of the Brooklyn Nets picks. I don't know how much would be too much, but I'd love to see Cam Johnson in a Rockets jersey. I'd love to see Mikal Bridges in a Rockets jersey. Either of those two guys, right? If you were able to get back some of those guys and you give Brooklyn some of their picks back, not all of them, but some of them, a couple of them, whatever it is, then maybe that's an interesting route that you could go to pick up another piece ahead of this offseason when the Rockets are looking to make all their big swings, all their big moves, coaching change, salary, signing guys with the cap space, all that stuff ahead of trying to be relevant next season. So what ultimately happens ahead of the NBA trade deadline? Is Eric Gordon still going to be a Houston Rocket 24 hours from now? Is Jae'Sean Tate still going to be a Rocket 24 hours from now? It'll be a very interesting trade deadline. I'm not holding my breath on any super duper blockbuster exciting moves for the Rockets, but I will be pleasantly surprised if they make some moves to acquire some future assets and actually start instituting some of the roster churn that we've been begging for a while. And of course, we'll have you covered for whatever moves the Rockets do make here at Locked On Rockets. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.